thank you guys for hanging with us for your fourth period. We're incredibly excited to pilot this assembly. You're the first group to see it, so it's really special and something that we want to give to the entire senior class next year. So Ms. Norman Franks and myself, we're here to support you throughout your 4 years in high school, and that support continues as you head off towards your next steps, which whatever that looks like for you, you're gonna have larger conversations, larger situations that are faced with that we're not there for you for. And although we miss you greatly, we have a team that's gonna be able to talk to you guys today to continue that support throughout that transition. We also want to just say how proud we are of you guys for all of the work that you've done within the past 4 years in your classes and your friends and your programs and your lack of sleep, no doubt. So as you're thinking of your next step, we're here with you, and this is why we put together this assembly. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Norman Franks, who's going to give a little intro, and then we'll get started.
I want to be super quick because I want us to have an opportunity to hear from all of our speakers. But the goal of today is to help you with this transition. We know it's really exciting to head off to college or whatever your future plans may be, but it can also feel very stressful at the same time. And we want to make sure as you enter into the next phase that you're safe and that you're taking care of your mental health. So let's all, if we have homework out, this is not study hour, let's please put it away. If I see cell phones, I'm going to assume you're using it. So let's go ahead and put those away. And let's give our full attention to our awesome panel. Thank you.
Yes, and we'll save, hopefully we'll have time to have questions at the end.
Okay. All right. Hi, good morning, everybody. It's really bright. Some of you might recognize me. My name's Anna, and I work at the UCLA Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center. And I actually come here and speak to the health classes. I know not everyone takes them, but if anyone saw my presentation or my team's presentation before, that's great. That means you guys learned already a little bit about consent. We have, 15 minutes each, and I want to give you guys some information about the topic of sexual harassment, sexual assault, as it pertains to college campuses. We know that this is an issue that impacts everybody, not just college students, but there is an increase of sexual assault that happens for young adults, actually whether or not they're on a college campus. So I guess the first thing I want to share with you guys is that it definitely is a prevalent problem. You might have heard about it. We know that about 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men will experience an attempted or completed sexual assault while they're a student. And the rates of men experiencing that are actually higher if they are a college student between the ages of 18 and 24 as opposed to those who are not students during those ages. So it's a relevant thing. We also know that there is a spike in sexual assaults that happen during the first few weeks of each semester, particularly fall semester. So that's just something to be aware of. I definitely don't want what I'm telling you guys to scare you. We know that most people are not victims, and most people are going to be in a situation of being a bystander where you can really do something about this and help to prevent it. And that's typically what our programs are a lot about. I would say, in addition to understanding that it's a prevalent issue, one of the most important things to understand is consent. So you all who are going off to college next year will for sure be hearing about consent more because it is the law in California and in some other states as well that consent education is part of orientation. And the definition of consent in California that's used on college campuses and universities is affirmative, conscious, voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. So it sounds pretty basic, and we would hope that that's the standard all the time. But sometimes there can be some confusion around whether or not it's okay to do something sexual with someone who's been consuming drugs or alcohol, or it's okay to pressure someone into doing something that they didn't really want to do. And it's really important to understand that those things are not okay. It's actually illegal to engage in sexual activity with someone who has been or is incapacitated incapacitated. That's sort of the legal language. So incapacitated, that's a pretty broad term. Basically, it just means that if someone has been drinking or using alcohol or drugs, any drug, and they are not completely aware of what's going on and the decisions that they're making and totally coherent, that they cannot consent to sexual activity. So it's really something I know that can be very confusing because there's so much media out there about high school and college in the United States especially, just drinking a lot and hooking up, and that happens fine in the movies, but unfortunately in real life it can and does lead to sexual assault sometimes. So just something to be really cautious of combining those two things, especially when they're relatively new in your life. And then the part on, I would say the other big piece is that it's not okay to convince someone to do something that they didn't want to do initially. We always want our partners to be happy and excited about what they're choosing to do with their bodies. So if it takes convincing, if we're not sure, that means that we have to stop, right? We actually have to have a non-pressuring conversation. We need to really be aware of what our partner is and isn't okay with ahead of time, so that we don't, get in a situation where something happens that someone wasn't okay with. So those are the two big pieces I would highlight about consent, I'd say. A lot of times we say now, yes means yes is sort of the policy. That means affirmative consent. So instead of just relying on someone not saying no, because we know that maybe they didn't say no because they were incapacitated. Maybe they didn't say no because they were scared. We now really think about consent as what did they say that let us really know that for sure they were okay with it. And that comes in the form of saying yes or something like yes paired with really mutual engaged body language. Okay. So aside from that, there were a few other things I wanted to mention. I have some notes here. So now I'm thinking about sort of how to help a friend and the resources that are available on college campuses. And lucky for you guys, there are more resources available on college campuses now than there ever have been before. And again, it's actually part of California requirements that there are counseling resources available specifically for survivors or victims of sexual assault. So schools are becoming much more prepared in this and are there to really help you right on campus if this is something that you or someone that you know experiences. So the first thing I would share is the fact that Title IX exists. So Title IX exists in high school. I'm so used to asking questions, but I'm going to try to not ask the audience questions. So Title IX, usually, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but usually we think about it in relation to sports. So providing like equal, based on gender, so equal opportunity for athletic equipment and things like that. That's what I remembered it as when I was in high school. But it's very broad. It applies to making sure that students are free from gender discrimination on college campuses, and so that and high school campuses, all public schools and private schools at the higher education level. To obtain their education. So if someone is a victim of sexual harassment or sexual assault, then they might not be able to easily access their right to education. So Title IX is required to step in if they know something about this. So when it comes to a student's opportunities or choices about where they want to seek help, if they have been a victim, they have a few choices. Title IX is one of them. Police are another, and then counseling center is another. So in brief, I'll try to explain it quickly and sort of so it makes sense. So Title IX is the office. They're sort of like, they investigate things related to the school. So they, just like a school needs to investigate if someone plagiarized, right? They're also required to investigate if they know that a sexual assault has happened between two people affiliated with the university or the college. So if someone tells a person who is called a responsible employee, so basically that's anyone that works at the university who's not a confidential employee, which is usually a therapist in the counseling center, that employee is required to tell the Title IX office that a sexual assault has happened to a student. And the Title IX office is required to look into that. A student can voluntarily, of course, go to the Title IX office and have them investigate a situation. Their investigation could result in suspension or expulsion of somebody, or even while the investigation is going on, changing classroom locations, changing living locations, so that someone is feeling safe on campus. If someone wants to report to Title IX and they also want to report to police, they can do that. Reporting to police is, as we would with any other crime, starting a criminal investigation, which could potentially lead to criminal charges. And reporting to the school and reporting to police are not mutually exclusive, so someone can do both, all right? Just because the school's investigating it doesn't mean that the police don't do that. It's always up to a victim or survivor to choose what kind of report they want to make. So they can choose police, they can choose the school, they can choose none of them, they can choose one of them. And then they can also, of course, choose to go to the counseling center where they can talk to a confidential employee who doesn't have a mandate to report. And that means you can just talk to a counselor about what has happened. And we always want to make sure people have that opportunity to do that in a confidential way, because there's plenty of reasons why someone might not want to report, but everyone should be able to access therapy and care without having to worry about the reporting. So that should always be present on your universities. We know at the UC campuses, there's something called the Care Center. So that is a center that's even outside of the counseling center that serves just people who have experienced sexual violence. And so that's a really unique and amazing resource on the UC campuses. How to help a friend. So these things, I think it's really overwhelming to think about what could I do, what would I say if I had someone close to me who has experienced this. And a lot of the things that are so helpful are actually really simple. So just listening is the most simple thing. And I know, sexual assault is something we can be really angry about. It's totally fine and justified to be angry about it, but we always want to make sure that we're sort of checking ourselves and doing what's best for our friend or loved one. And that might mean not asking them a lot of questions right in the beginning and really wanting to take action right away in the way that you feel would be most helpful. We really want to go at our friend's pace and really listen to what they're ready to tell us when they're ready to do that. And then provide them with resources and sort of options for all of the things, getting counseling or reporting. So paying attention at your orientations about Title IX and the counseling resources on campus is really good to have if you ever need to refer someone to those or talk to them about how to do that. In the immediate aftermath, making sure someone feels safe and getting them to a safe place. I guess I'm sort of backtracking a little bit, but first and foremost, want to make sure someone feels safe if something has happened to them. Then the listening piece, reminding someone that sexual assault is never their fault. We live in a pretty victim-blaming world, and it's really easy to get caught up in sort of this idea that someone should have been able to prevent this from happening to them. And when we fall into that way of thinking, it really puts the onus on the victim. And we want to be careful of that and know that the only reason why sexual assault happens is because someone chose to do it. And another human being actually made that decision to harm someone. So that's really important also to keep in mind that it is absolutely never the victim's fault, and sometimes it can be helpful to remind our friend of that. And let's see, now my last piece, I think I have a few more minutes, is I was asked to speak about sort of how to be safe on college campuses. This is something that's a sensitive topic because, as I just mentioned, there's a fine line between protecting ourselves and then feeling like we hold a responsibility for protecting ourselves and that it's not up to other people to not assault. So I just want to preface that. And really the best way to prevent sexual assault from happening, of course, is to know it's not okay to do it. And secondly, is to be active bystanders. So really trusting your gut. When you see something happening that isn't okay, when you see someone who is clearly not coherent, being approached by someone else, being isolated by someone else, knowing that you have a responsibility and hopefully feel like you can step in. And when I have more time, we really break down the ways of intervening. So depending on your personality, intervening can be difficult. It's not always easy. And I want you guys to know that it doesn't always need to be direct. You don't need to be going up to someone and yelling at them or calling them out for a possible sexual assault. That can be really scary to do. We might not know what their intentions are. So thinking about alternative ways to do this is a great thing. So one of my favorites is distraction. So using a distraction technique, this way you don't need to mention anything about sexual assault at all, and you can get really creative with it. So for those of you who've been in our classes, maybe you remember we talk about doing something as simple as saying, hey, can I talk to you really quick in the bathroom? Or our ride is here, we have to go. Or someone's feeling sick, like, come on, we have to leave, right? Just totally, it's okay to lie about something that's going on. It could be something sillier, like pretending to spill a drink on someone and then trying to clean them up. Or saying that the cops are coming to the party. So you can go as far as you want to go with this, but the point is you don't need to call someone out for a sexual assault, and oftentimes people feel more comfortable maybe doing that. The other option is to not do it alone, so grabbing a friend, saying, hey, will you come talk to them with me, use the distraction with me. You might not even be the best person to intervene. So if you're the one seeing it, remembering, okay, like, who should I talk to now? Maybe that person's friend is in the other room and you can go get them. Or maybe it's the person whose house it is who's throwing the party. Maybe they have more power and authority to say, hey, you have to leave, to the perpetrator, or you can't go in that room, that kind of thing. So also thinking outside of yourselves and being aware of maybe who in the situation might have more authority to do something. Beyond that, getting into, you guys, this is a really exciting time in your lives. You're going to be meeting and making so many new friends really quickly. There is sometimes a false sense of safety with that. You feel like you get to know people really fast, you learn a lot about them really quickly, you're spending all of your time with people, but it takes a little while to earn trust from someone. So doing your best to really plan out your nights with your new friends, saying, hey, we aren't going to leave each other at a party alone. We're always going to be with each other. We're going to make sure when we leave at night, at the end of the night, we know where everyone is. So little things like that, can be helpful, holding, the friend group accountable for keeping their friends safe. Let's see, a few other pieces of advice. So there will probably be campus security and also things called safe rides, or schools call them all different things, but rides that are available to students, so free, that they could call to get them from one place to another at any hour. And those are really awesome. So in addition to Uber and Lyft, those rides are safe and probably hopefully safer than Uber and Lyft. Another thing I'll add while I'm on it is that we really don't want to put someone who's incapacitated in an Uber or Lyft or a taxi alone. Unfortunately, that is not safe either 100% of the time, so we either want to go with them or find someone we know we can trust to go with them to get them home safely. And then finally, I mentioned, you can lie if you're trying to intervene in a situation. You can also lie if you're in an uncomfortable situation yourself and say, hey, I don't know, you can think of a lot of different things, but oh my gosh, my roommate's trying to call me, pretend your phone is going off. You can come up with excuses in those moments as well to remove yourself from an uncomfortable situation if you can. But the bottom line, you guys, with this is to remember it is absolutely never a victim's fault. We can all try to do our best to keep ourselves safe, but it's not possible 100% of the time. And unfortunately, people do commit this crime. So just remember that it's absolutely never the fault of the victim, and we must start to create safer places and safer environments for people to come forward and get help so that we can hold the people who are doing this more accountable. So that's my final parting word. I know that was really quick, and I hope that you guys have questions and I'll be able to stick around for them if you do. Okay.
Hi. Hi, Liz. Can I get another one? And this is Trevor.
Hi.
Hi, Trevor. Can you give Trevor an even bigger hi?
Hi, Trevor.
Awesome. Trevor, will you time me for 5 minutes? Thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Is this too much or is this good? Okay.
Testing.
Okay, so we work at the Haven at college at USC. So I'm a therapist there. I do group therapy and individual therapy. And we're going to be talking about drinking at college and drugs and whatever else comes up. So if you are an employee at Beverly Hills High, could you close your eyes? So close your eyes, close your eyes. Okay, so who here has ever drank alcohol? Who here has ever gotten drunk? Okay, well, he's just the cool theater teacher. Who here has ever smoked weed or eaten edibles or anything like that? Okay, great, good stuff.
No judgments, be you.
So guys, why do we do that? No teachers. I'm sorry. I want the kids to tell me.
Religion. So it's part of Manischewitz.
Testing.
Did I turn that? No? Okay. So it's part of your religious ceremonies? Yeah? Yeah. I can't hear you. Sure. So what do you like about it? You don't do it. Okay. What do you guys like about it?
What do you think? Fun to do?
It's fun to do with your friends, so it helps build connections with friends. What else?
Peer pressure?
Peer pressure, so sometimes you might feel a little pressured. What else? Escape from reality, right? Sometimes we all just want to unwind, check out at the end of the day. Any other reasons? Is it fun? Yeah, sometimes it's fun, okay? Okay, we're all gonna take a deep breath. One inside, 1, 2, 3, 4. And out, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's to calm you, it's also to calm me. And who here is going to college out of state? Right. Okay, so one of the things especially that happens when we go to college out of state is we're a little bit further away from our friends and family. We're meeting all these new people at college, and we want to connect to all these new people, and one of the easiest ways to do that is going to be to drink alcohol and smoke weed with other people. So I'm going to talk really quickly about the point of diminishing returns. So what typically happens is we start to drink and we start to feel the initial effects of alcohol, which are relaxation, what else? Euphoria, what else? And we start to feel good and we think, I feel good on 2 drinks, I'm gonna feel great on 5 drinks. What happens on 5 drinks? Real drunk. You might throw up, you might black out, you might be mean to your cousin, you might, what else could we do when you're really drunk? You might text your ex, that's a terrible thing to do. Very specific, I made it more specific, yeah. Right, so one of the things that's also potentially going to happen in college is you're going to be drinking at parties, and it's not going to be as measured out as it might be at Passover, where it's like Bruno with the glasses and the, yeah. And so I want us to all be really aware of how much alcohol is actually going into your cup, right? So you know those red Solo cups, if you drink out of those? Yes, yeah, that's how much alcohol you're gonna put in your cup, sir. I saw you. You're kidding? Yeah? You got it, I saw him. I can see you. Right, so on those red Solo cups, there's a couple different lines. There's one line at the very bottom, and that's a 1-shot line, right? So when you're drinking, that is 1 drink filling into that one little line. And what might happen at college is you're not paying attention, or whoever's pouring you the drink isn't paying attention, and so they just put in like halfway up. So how many shots are in half of a red Solo cup? It's like 4. It's like 4. She said 8. It's like 4 shots, right? Yeah. And so what we want to be really conscious of is how much liquor we're putting into our bodies, because that's going to influence what our blood alcohol content is, and that's going to influence how drunk we get, which is also going to influence how long it takes to recover from being drunk. So, another question, who here has ever suffered from depression? Who here has ever suffered from anxiety? Yeah. So alcohol and marijuana are depressants. That means that even though initially they are going to release some endorphins and lead to a feeling of euphoria to begin with, over time, they're going to make you more depressed. And so what I see a lot is I have students come into my office and they say, like, I'm just so depressed, and smoking weed is the only time that I don't feel depressed, but now I'm reliant on weed to not feel depressed. And I tell them, weed is a depressant, so you're just wiring your brain to be more and more depressed. Right? Same thing with alcohol. Or I hear people say, I'm so anxious when I'm high or drunk is the only time I don't feel anxious. And again, that's because you're then wiring your brain so that the only time you can relax is when you're drunk. Right? So those are the warning signs. Now, what are so there's external consequences and internal consequences of drinking. What are some of the external consequences that you guys can think of that might happen on a college campus?
Vomit.
Rape? What'd you say? Gain weight. Oh, next. External. Gaining weight. Yeah, that makes sense. What else? Failing classes. Yeah, yeah, and I think she made a very good point that, you know, it's you have the right to go out and get drunk, and that doesn't mean you have the right to be assaulted, right? Oh, are you timing me?
I was. Oh yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, we're at halfway.
We can circle back after.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought. Trevor's gonna take it away now. Thanks. guys.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm kind of an example of like the worst case scenario here of like if you try all this stuff and it doesn't work, or so yeah, I started drinking in 8th grade. I had my first drink. It was Mike's Hard Lemonade before a middle school dance. I was wearing a Soldier Boy t-shirt at the time. So yeah, that was my peak, and it's been all downhill since. And then in high school, you know, I drank like not too often, like probably about like once a month in, towards like junior year. You know, I was so focused on just classes and sports and just everything else going on that, you know, I kind of pushed it off of like, okay, senior year and then college is when I'm really going to like embrace partying. In senior year, yeah, definitely after basketball season was over, I was like, okay, now, like I considered my second semester of senior year of high school to be my first semester of college, and started to drink a lot and smoke weed, and throughout high school I never really had any consequences. Like hello? Okay. I had some small stuff, like I had my parents get mad at me or whatever, like, but my grades never suffered. I, you know, still playing sports and everything, you know, just had on the outside, everything in my life was great. So they never really had an issue with it. They're like, okay, he's just being a high school kid. He's, you know, this is what seniors in high school do. And, you know, then when I went out to college, I went to USC, and when I first joined, it was more of the same of, it didn't really affect my life too much. I was partying a lot, but I was still getting good grades. I had a good internship. I had lots of friends. I had an awesome girlfriend, and everything in my life was great. But I gradually started to see myself drinking more and more, smoking more and more weed, and starting to experiment with other drugs. And you know, I kind of let myself off the hook, and it's kind of hard to tell for me that my drinking was abnormal because I was surrounded by people. I was in a fraternity. I was surrounded by people that were also blacking out a lot and drinking a lot, and for me, it seemed really normal. But as I continued in college, I kept thinking, okay, after freshman year, I'm good. Like, everyone parties super hard their freshman year, but after that, I'm going to like calm down and like focus on school. And it just got worse and worse until I was blacking out like 4 or 5 times a week. And that was someone that was just like, I never thought I was going to be that person in high school. And it's funny coming to speak to you guys because like if I had been in an assembly my senior year of high school, I'd just been like, this has nothing to do with me. And like I'm not like expecting you guys to hear just like one story and be like, okay, I'm not going to drink. Like that's not realistic. But it is important to realize that alcohol does affect certain people in different ways, and sometimes for me, I realized it was a problem. And you know, eventually I went to rehab, and then I was a client for the Haven at College, which is the company I work for now, where we have a sober living and an outpatient center on USC's campus. And I wish I had known earlier about some of the resources that are at my disposal at college, and just to reach out for help. And I tried for so long to deal with it on my own. I thought I was just depressed or anxious. I thought that alcohol and weed and other things were actually my solution and not my problem. And as I relied on them more and more, I just like went down this downward spiral to the point where I was dropping out of school and completely out of money and just like in a really bad place. And it wasn't until that I reached out for help, I started seeing a counselor, and then started admitting what I was going through, that I was able to really get some perspective and realize that what I was doing wasn't normal. And you know, I'm really just grateful for just my experience in getting to find out about the resources I had on campus, and we can talk more about those later another time, but just being aware that alcohol and drugs do have consequences, and for specific people that some people are going to need to reach out for outside help in order to address those problems. And with that, I realize my time is up, so I'll pass it on to Brittany.
Thank you, Trevor. Can everyone stand up for me, please? Stretch it out a little bit. I'm going to do a quick exercise with you guys. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone's going to get a number. We're going to start with you in the back. You're going to call out your number, and once you hit 5, we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Can you guys hear me? Do I need this? I don't need this, right? Okay. So starting in the corner, you're going to be 1. So yell 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. You with the glasses right here, below. You. Oh, where? Up here.
3, 4,
5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you be louder?
1, 2, 3, 4,
5.
1,
2, 3,
4,
5.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5.
1. We're going out of order. It's okay. It doesn't matter. Just remember your number.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We said 2.
2,
4, 5.
1.
2, 3,
4,
5. 1, 2, 3.
It doesn't matter.
5, 2, 1.
3, 4. You did it? Does everyone have a number?
No.
So if you got gypped, I'm sorry. That's the way we go. We're on time limit. If you are the number, pick a number, Mrs. Norman Frank. 3. If you're the number 3, I want you to continue to stand. Everyone else sit down. All right, and now I'm going to pick some random 3s to stand up. Will you stand up? Will you stand up behind her? Yeah. Okay. You number threes are representing the number 1 and 5. One adult, one college student has a mental health condition, lives with a mental health diagnosis. 1 in 5 in adults live in the United States with a mental health condition. As adults entering college, 18-year-olds, you are representing the college students who have a mental health condition, okay? Now half of you sit down, this half sit down. You guys are representing the students who don't get any help on college campuses and aren't aware of their mental health conditions, okay? Now you can take a seat. Thank you. My name's Brittany Bronson. I graduated Beverly Hills High School in 2008, so I'm an alumni. I went to Arizona State University, but before I went to Arizona State, I had a little bit of trouble during high school. I struggled with an eating disorder. Coach Brattle kicked me off the basketball team. Does anyone know Coach Brattle? Yeah. He did that because I wasn't taking care of my body. When I was a junior, my best friend died in a drunk driving car accident.
Bahagan Setien, you've all heard of him.
Does everyone know V? Yeah, so he was my best friend and he died when we were juniors. And so after junior year, I kind of spiraled into this deep, dark depression, started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. Cover your ears if you're a teacher here. Did a lot of drugs on campus my senior year. Was not a good role model. Lived 2 separate lives. I was the ASB president and was also doing these things. I was a 4.0 student and also doing these things. And got away with it and managed to go to school. And when I went to school in Arizona, I was away from my friends and my family and my support system. And I started to experiment further in college. And just like we learned here, what I thought at fraternity parties was maybe 1 shot was actually maybe 2 or 3 or 4 shots in a cup. And it was mixed and it tasted good. So I drank a lot of them. And this one time, I had an experience at a fraternity, and I am a survivor of a very violent sexual assault that happened when I was in Arizona. I left school because of that. I also left school because I was messing around with drugs, and I got caught and was arrested and went to jail. And when I went to rehab, I was diagnosed with a mental health condition called ADHD. And that was in a short period of time between my freshman year and my sophomore year of school. And during that time period when I was in rehab, I was very manipulative and convinced my therapists and everyone to let me go back to Arizona because I was fine and I was okay. So I did. And it was a mistake. And when I went back to school, I got in even more trouble and did other things that weren't good. And I had to come home. My parents brought me home and I spiraled into a deep, deep, dark depression. And I tried to end my own life. And when I did that, I was 5150. Does anyone familiar with what a 5150 is? Yeah, so for those of you who aren't, a 5150 is a mandatory 72-hour, 3-day hold for someone who is a harm or a threat to others and themselves. And because I tried to end my own life, I was put on a 5150, and eventually I was bounced around from institution to institution during this college experience of mine, and was properly diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder and PTSD. I unfortunately did not go back to Arizona physically because it was too traumatic for me to be there. However, I did graduate online. But what I have to say to you guys is that at the time when I was in school, I didn't know of any of the resources that you guys are going to have when you guys go to school. And I think when you get there, when you're unpacking your bags and you're doing your whole dorm situation, the first thing that you should do is make a list of resources and support systems and really find good friends that can help you go through these things. because for me, the reason that I went to rehab the first time, that my parents even knew about my sexual assault, was because I had some really good college friends. My roommates were really amazing, and they reached out to my parents and they said, Brittany's going through a lot right now. And you don't know this because we're in Arizona and you live in California in Beverly Hills, but it's time for her to get some help. So I really highly encourage you to find that support system. I also encourage you to enjoy yourselves and find the right balance, okay? I'm not here preaching to you to tell you not to try things. You're gonna try them regardless, and you're gonna experiment, but do them in the safest way possible, and make sure you realize that, like, you're really precious, and everyone, you know, enjoy college. I wish I had that 4-year experience. I wish I got to be able to live that life. But everything happens for a reason, and I'm honored and blessed to be sharing my experience with you today. So go Normans, and still go Devils.
You guys are an awesome audience. Thank you so much. We do still have some time for Q&A. So I think we're very fortunate to have a group who's been allow themselves to be vulnerable and share. So I hope you can feel comfortable and ask questions.
Have you visited any other college campuses?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I speak with an organization called the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I have spoken at Pepperdine and UCLA and USC within the last couple of months.
Would you say that Arizona exposed you to many more drugs than others?
No, I think that's a common misconception. I think that any school you go to, there's going to be drugs and alcohol. I think that ASU in particular is a school that is notorious for being a party school. We're the largest university in the country. But I feel like wherever you go, you're going to find people that are doing drugs and alcohol, and you're going to get peer pressured anywhere.
Eli?
This is a question for the guys. Since you were getting a 4.0 and you were like going to USC, and
I didn't say I got a 4.0, but yeah.
or
That was-
you're really good at
That was
being
me.
academic excellence, how do you identify that you had a problem with your drinking since you were balancing everything out?
Yeah, so I didn't have too much time to go into that, but I just started to have more and more consequences in college. There started to be more mornings where I'd wake up and my friends would be like, dude, you were such a jerk last night, or they'd tell me some story of just, now I was to embarrass myself. And then, even more than that, I just started to feel more depressed and more anxious, and I noticed at the same time my drinking and my use was increasing. And the biggest way that I was able to realize I had a problem is when I started to try to control it and started to try to like take a period of like, okay, I'm gonna be sober for a month or whatever, and I realized that I couldn't stop. And it was, it was really once I started to have some consequences, decide I needed to take a break, and realize I was incapable of taking a break was when I realized I had a real problem.
Other questions?
This kind of broad question. Do you think being honest with yourself is one of the most important things in all of this?
It's a great
Looked like that was directed at you.
Yes. I will say that like I have always considered myself someone who's very self-aware and able to be honest with myself. I would also say I was very unprepared for just the effects that drugs and alcohol were having on just my mental health, and that while I was going through that, I felt like I was actually incapable of being honest with myself because, just because I learned about this in rehab about how your brain gets rewired when you are addicted to something, and it was no longer like I was consciously choosing to drink and use. It was that like subconsciously my brain was telling me that I needed alcohol and drugs. So while I was going to counseling about trying to like get sober or trying to stay sober, but the thing is my like subconscious brain was telling me like to continue to use. So self-awareness is definitely huge, and being honest with yourself is definitely a great thing. But it doesn't make you
immune to some of the realities that come with drugs and alcohol, that when you're changing your mental health, you're changing your brain chemistry, that things can occur. And it's just good to know where the resources are to start talking to get outside help and not try to, because if you think, oh, I'm really honest with myself, then you're going to try to deal with it all on your own, and sometimes it takes an outside perspective.
You know, Trevor, what you just said that stood out to me was you shared some external consequences as well as some internal consequences, like the feeling of shame that you felt when your fraternity brothers would tell you about your behavior the night before. And I think that those internal feelings of depression and embarrassment, that is the trigger for maybe something in my life isn't working.
I'd like to just add something about my experience in college. When I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was given stimulants, and I definitely abused those, and I think that there is a healthy way to learn about education around medication for mental health conditions, and that's something that you should be aware of going to school. And like, you know that phrase, like, it's okay to not be okay, and I think that you should embrace that. And that's what I was going to say to you is, like, being honest with yourself and opening up a conversation about mental health is so important. And like, everyone's talking about it now, and you're going to deal with anxiety and pressure and depression in school, so please find those resources to help you get through that.